I guess so. The main piece of kit now for a photojournalist is a Kevlar vest, which who would have ever thought, like when you're covering peaceful protests that you would need to wear a Kevlar vest.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but that beautiful. A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but
Hey, how are y'all doing out there in podcast land? Welcome to episode 4 of Red Lens. On this episode, I talk with Thaiphy Phan-Quang. Thaiphy is a great Twin Cities-based photographer, a former videographer, and an all-around great guy. You'll hear about his journey from skateboarding to skateboarding videographer to movement photographer, and much more. You can see some of Thaiphy's work and get in touch with him on Facebook and Instagram. I'll post the links in the show notes on my Patreon page. I'm excited that I've been able to get this podcast off the ground, and now I'm 4 episodes in. I've been doing 1 episode a month, which is what I planned, so I'm happy I've been able to stick to that schedule so far. I'm learning how to do this as I go, so thanks for bearing with me. It's a total DIY effort, so I'm not only doing the interviews, but also editing and cleaning up the audio files, then compiling the whole episode using free software called Audacity. It's a lot of fun, but it's something that I'm learning as I go. For the next one after this, the 5th episode, I've already done the interview, so hopefully I'll get that edited and released on the same schedule to keep them coming once a month. I have a lot of ideas for people that I'd like to interview after that, but I'd also like to hear from you. Let me know if you have ideas for political photographers or other people I could interview or topics I could cover. Also, feel free to touch base if you have any comments, praise, or criticisms of what I've been doing so far on the podcast. You can reach me at theredlenspodcast@gmail.com. Before we get into this episode's interview, I'm going to go through some news and updates in my little corner of the photography and politics world. I mentioned this last time, but I'm going to talk about it again because now I have my copy of the book in hand, and it's great. If you've been to any protests demanding justice for lives stolen by the police in the Twin Cities since 2020, you've most likely seen Brandon Lee Tulloch lead chants or do powerful spoken word. He's now published his second book, Land of the Free, Home of the Brave. You can and should buy a copy. It's available for purchase on lulu.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. In addition to Brandon's words, the book also includes photos from a bunch of great local movement photographers, and it also has a few of mine as well. So get your copy today. I recently got a fun treat in the mail. It's a photo book/zine called All Access Bands on Film. It's a photo book/zine of punk bands from the late 80s and 1990s in Washington, D.C. and in California. It includes some lesser-known bands, but also some bands that are now pretty big names. Everyone from Fugazi to Social Distortion, to Henry Rollins, to Agnostic Front, Green Day, L7, Pantera, Smashing Pumpkins, and more. The photographer, who said she doesn't really feel comfortable being called that, so I guess the person who took the photos in this book, is Shauna Kenny. Sean is a friend who I met when I moved to DC in the 1980s, and we both did punk fanzines at the time. We were part of a small group of people who put out zines back then, and it's been really cool seeing her ongoing success as a writer, and of course, as we see in this book, as a photographer too. You can check out this book and her other work at her website, shaunakenny.com. I'll share the link to that in the show notes as well. There's one more really cool photo book I'd like to mention that came out fairly recently. It's by the legendary punk photographer Glenn E. Friedman. This book has his photos of the band Black Flag, and it's titled What I See, The Black Flag Photographs of Glenn E. Friedman. There are hundreds of pages of photos of Black Flag playing live in concert as well as practicing, and both posed and candid shots of the band. The book includes some classic Black Flag photos that fans have almost surely seen before, in addition to hundreds more never-before-seen photos. Since these photos were taken in the 1980s, of course, everything was shot on film. Given that, the quality is absolutely amazing. What Glenn Friedman was able to do with film and without doing any cropping or anything like that is just mind-blowing. The pure emotion that he conveys in these photos it just absolutely matches the rest of his super inspiring work. So definitely get a copy if that's something that sounds interesting to you. The book was published by Akashic Press, and I'll include a link in the show notes as well. Switching gears from photography to politics, I wanted to mention a pretty new podcast I've been really excited about. It's called Fight Back Radio. There have been 6 episodes so far, and all of them have been great. Fight Back Radio is hosted by a longtime friend of mine and a union organizer named Richard Berg in Chicago. Fight Back Radio, it's affiliated with Fight Back News, which I've also done photography and writing for many years. Fight Back Radio interviews grassroots activists who are in the trenches fighting for justice in many different movements. I really like the focus of this podcast on activists who are actually in the streets doing organizing. It's relatable and focuses on the most important thing if you want to fight back against injustice and change the world, doing something. I'll share the link for that as well, and you can check it out and subscribe to it. On another political note, let's talk about FBI raids. As everyone's probably heard, Donald Trump had his home in Florida raided by the FBI, apparently. But Donald Trump isn't the only one the FBI has raided recently. And for the whole history of the FBI, their main target has overwhelmingly been the left, the Black Freedom Movement, the labor movement, and anyone progressive trying to change things in this country. Yeah, very infrequently, they'll go after someone on the right, like Trump, but even at the same time as they do that, they're also targeting the left. That's what happened on July 29th when the FBI raided homes and offices of the Uhuru Movement, a black socialist group in St. Louis, Missouri and St. Petersburg, Florida. When I saw articles and interviews with the people who were raided, it looked very similar to me in some ways to the FBI raids that happened on September 24, 2010 against the Anti-War 23 in Minneapolis, Chicago, and other cities. This is a very concerning development for people active in movements for change, and I think it's crucial to stand with the Uhuru movement in resisting this political repression. It's also a good time to remind ourselves that, and everyone in the movement fighting for change, about some basics. One is don't talk to the FBI, period. If they come to your home or office, don't tell them anything except your name and that they can talk to your lawyer. You don't want to talk to the FBI, but you do want to talk to the people and publicize what happened. The FBI likes to work in secrecy and use intimidation. That doesn't work if people refuse to be intimidated and put everything out in the open. The Uhuru movement did that. They did a press conference right after the raids denouncing what happened as political repression. They went public, and that's the right thing to do. People who are facing repression like this should want everyone to know who they are so that people can support them as they face the prospect of grand juries, possible serious federal charges and trials, and the possibility of prison time for their anti-imperialist politics. To stay up on what's going on, you should follow the Committee to Stop FBI Repression and the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression at Stop FBI and at NARPR. Those are two organizations who have been fighting against FBI repression and political repression against the left for many years, and they'll definitely have information as things move forward. I'll put those links in the show notes as well. You can also read their statement condemning these FBI raids against the Uhuru movement, which again, I'll also link in the show notes. That pretty much wraps up the Red Lens news and updates for this episode. So with that, sit back and enjoy this episode's interview.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land. But
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new shiny episode of everybody's favorite podcast, Red Lens Podcast. I've made it past a couple episodes, so I'm guessing this podcast now has a longer run than most podcasts. I'm sure it'll all be smooth sailing from here on out, and my path to being an influencer with a life of fame and fortune is just waiting to happen. Yeah, just kidding. That's not really what this is about. But anyway, I have a great guest here today, someone who was actually talked about a lot in the first episode when I interviewed Phil Ward, because today's guest has been a big influence on both me and him in our trajectories with photography, and I hope I can say has been a friend as well. So why don't we start out with just a little bit about who you are, where you live, and some of what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Thaiphy Phan-Quang. I go by, most people know me as Thaiphy. I live in the Frogtown neighborhood of St. Paul. I've been here since 2014. I'm a father of two, and I also do photography.
I'm glad you do photography since that's what we're here to talk about. Yeah, so you said you moved to Minnesota in 2014. Before that, you lived in the Bay Area, is that right? I think you've told me you did some videography out there, filming skateboarding videos and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So actually, before the Bay Area, I was in New Orleans for a couple of years. But before that, I was living in San Francisco, and just all over the Bay Area. I was in the East Bay. I've lived in, Sacramento a couple of times. And then I met my wife in San Francisco. We moved to New Orleans for a couple of years, and then moved up to Minnesota in 2014. But yeah, Bay Area is where I started is where I started my media journey. Let's see. So I started doing videography as a result of just skateboarding.
Did you skate too, or just do video work of other people skating?
Yeah, no. So I started skating first, and probably in the mid '90s, video VHS skateboard videos started to become kind of a big deal. And at that time, compact video cameras were more accessible, or I think were just starting to come out. Like I think in
Mhm.
'94 or yeah, '94, I at Sac State, I was renting video cameras, and they were like the shoulder mounted VHS
Like
tape
big, heavy.
loading. Yeah, and those were camcorders,
Yeah.
and I would lug those around and film like one other person at Sac State that skated. Then in like '95, my dad got me a Circuit City credit card. Do they have Circuit City out here?
Yeah, it used to be here. Yeah, I think
Or
it's
but
gone now, right?
used to,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was just, yeah. I don't, but he got me a Circuit City credit card, and I got my first video camera. It was a JVC. I can't remember the model, but obviously JVC is stands for Junkie Video Camera, because they're like the absolute worst. Yeah, and I would use that to film my friends, and
What did you do with those videos? Like this is obviously
so
before social media and all that.
yeah, this is totally before social media. So it really it wasn't like we were filming back then. It wasn't like we were filming for a specific video. We would just film tricks, because in skateboarding, like if there's no record of you doing a trick at a spot, then there's no proof. If there's no video or photo actually of
Mhm.
you doing the trick at the spot, then it just never happened. And so it became like, for like skateboarders that got to a certain level, it was like you wouldn't even really go out unless somebody had a video camera and a camera, because
Hmm.
otherwise it would just be a waste of time. Yeah, so I get this camera, and so we would just film every day, and then after a while you'd be like, hey, we should make a video, we should put this all together. So I'd take my Circuit City credit card, and after we filmed whatever we needed, and it was time to start editing, I went and I got like this is linear editing. This is before nonlinear editing, right? So it was like you had to have a mixer, you had to have a titler, you had to have two high eight decks or whatever tapes you were using at the time. I think there was high eight, and there was like VHS-C and like a couple of other ones, but these were like the smaller tapes.
Okay.
And then what? So a titler, a mixer, and then a couple of screens, right? A couple of monitors. And I
Hmm.
would edit it, and and back then to edit, I think my first video like that I did completely alone by myself, like filmed and edited and everything in linear editing, it took me like 6 months to edit, and it was like a 12-minute video, you
Six
know?
months. Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and because because it's linear editing, so you have to do everything, you have to lay everything down in the exact order that you want it to be in. And
Hmm.
then you go through and you lay down the titles, and then you lay down the music, and then what fade, and then you got to lay down the fades and the transitions. And so, and every time you did that, the quality of the video just got worse and worse and worse and worse. But it was fun. I mean, it was great.
Just as you're saying this, I'm remembering because I skated in high school and a little bit into college, and that was like mid to late '80s, early '90s. And I remember like we would get our hands, me and my friends, on videotapes of like people like Steve Caballero, people like that, or whatever the companies were. They would make these compilation tapes of their skaters, just. And
Yeah.
it was like, oh my God, getting your hands on one of those and just watching and like, how did they do that?
Totally. And it was gold, and you would just watch it over and over again. And it was like the only access that you had, because there was no internet, there was no Instagram,
And that stuff would
you
never
know.
be on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So you started out skating and then just doing video of you and your friends skating and editing it, taking 6 months at a time. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And we made a couple of videos, and then, like I worked at a skate shop, and we would we'd make shop videos after that. Like I made a how-to video, how to ollie and how to, do whatever other tricks, how to put together your board. Yeah, it was really cool. It was cool because like it wasn't like I picked up a video camera because I wanted to start film. It was like a necessity as a skateboarder to be able to film and do that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
So like if you're doing video of someone skating on a ramp or in a pool or in a stationary place, you can sort of be in one spot and be filming. But if you're doing like street skating where people are going through a city or whatever, they're moving and you have to then be moving too, right? So like,
Right.
how did you
Right.
do that? Were you on a
So yeah,
skateboard too? Were you in a
yeah.
car? Like,
No, I'd be on a skateboard, and usually it would have bigger wheels. rubber, or not rubber, but softer. It would be bigger, softer wheels so that it was quieter, but also faster. So it was supposed to take less effort for me to keep up with them, but a lot of skateboarders get really fast. And in San Francisco, there's the hills, and
Oh man,
so you
those
gotta,
hills.
yeah. So it can definitely get pretty intense. And actually, like in my older years now, I actually developed scoliosis as a result of filming, because when you have one foot up on the board and then your other foot is like a couple inches
Mm.
hanging below at all times, because you're pushing and your foot's constantly dragging to control speed and going back and forth. I actually extended my right leg 2 inches over the years, which like totally screwed up my hips, which screwed up my spine.
Oh
And
man.
now like my back just kind of looks like this.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're like filming, and cameras today have in-body image stabilization and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
did those cameras have that, or were you
Nope.
like, everything was like
No.
shaking
Very
as you're going?
Yeah, no, very steady. Like you had to keep, and these are the things that you had to be conscious about, like the distance that you kept from them, and going at speed. Like you're basically having to choreograph, so let's say it's a 3-trick line, okay, meaning you do 3 tricks in a row, and you're pushing in between from one obstacle to another, right? And so let's say you've got a set of stairs that you do a trick down, right? So I'd have to either have one skateboard on the top of the stairs and then another skateboard on the bottom of the stairs, and I'd have to run down the stairs, jump on the second set of stairs, still be able to keep up with the skater that went down the stairs, follow him next to the ledge, and you have to be conscious of being in front of their face, because you don't want to film their butt, right? So if a
Right, right.
skateboarder is one stance or another stance, you have to take that into consideration too. So you have to map out your entire line before you're even doing the trick. Like when you see it on the street, it looks like a couple of fumbling fools just falling all over the place, right? Just like, what are these guys doing? But there's actually so much intent and so much like preparation into like just filming a simple line.
Amazing. So, other than scoliosis, which you just talked about, like, did you have any other injuries in filming people where you're skating and then you just don't see because you're focusing on video? You may not see like a rock or a stick in the way, or like a
All
pothole.
constant daily. It was via daily, whether it was yeah, rocks were huge. Gosh, what would be, so many skateboards to the head, because a skateboarder board flies out, and a lot of times when you're using fisheye too, you're like right there, you're like really, really close.
I was going to
And
ask about that. Yeah, with if you used fisheye for video too, not just I guess for photos, but for video.
oh yeah, hugely. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I had a really bad wide angle lens on my first JVC. But then when I finally upgraded to like what they call the prosumer camera, I actually when I started filming like seriously, and that kind of became my full time. From like I had completely, because of my back, like my back got so bad where I couldn't even do tricks on a skateboard anymore. And so it was like, okay, well, now the only thing that I can do is film skateboarding, because there's no way I'm leaving skateboard, like
Mm.
it's been a part of my blood since I was like 10 years old. And so,
So you were super close then too. So did you get damaged equipment from the skateboard hitting the camera? Like, did that happen a lot?
constantly. The lens, the fisheye, I don't know. I probably went through 10, 15 fisheyes easily. Yeah. So after a while, you got into the prosumer. The Sony VX1000 was a big camera, and the Canon equivalent of that was the Canon GL1. And Century Optics made a fisheye lens called it was the MK1 is what it was called. And it was like a manhole cover. That's what that was the nickname of it. It's this giant lens, and it pretty much changed and pretty much revolutionized skateboard videography at that point, because it was just like that lens with the combination of the Sony VX1000 or even the VX2000, after the colors and the picture, the way it just made the skateboarder just look. It was made, that lens, that setup was just made to shoot skateboard videos. People still use those cameras today with that lens to shoot skateboarding. And actually, the funny thing is, Century Optics actually discontinued that lens, and then the skateboarding community went into a freaking uproar about it. They were like,
Wow.
you can't, and they brought the lens back for skateboarders, which is
Wow.
awesome.
So some people might be listening who don't know as much about camera gear, or like what a fisheye lens is. And one of the photographers who I really learned a lot from and was inspired by, because like I started out doing pictures like at punk shows, and then also used to skateboard as Glenn E. Friedman,
Oh
who
yeah,
he
sure.
he did a lot of photos like starting in the 70s of some of the early skaters, and he I
Uh-huh.
think used a fisheye lens at least on some of his best stuff. So what is a fisheye lens, and why is that so good for skateboarding?
So what is a fisheye? I mean, fisheye lens is almost exactly what it sounds like. It's this bulbous lens. It looks like a fisheye. It pretty much gives you almost, I mean, maybe some of them even do give you a full 180-degree view of whatever it is. But if it's a poorly made lens, you can get vignetting on the outside, the black ring along
Yeah.
the outside. It tends to get, bad fisheyes can also be very distorted, but that distortion also is what was really good for skateboarding, and why a fisheye is so important in skateboarding is because you can get really close to the action and it amplifies everything. It makes everything look bigger, right? So a set of stairs is going to look bigger, a handrail is going to look bigger with the proper knowledge of how to use the lens. If you're standing super far away, it's going to look tiny, but if you get really close to it, it takes up the whole frame and makes it look way steeper than it is or way longer than it is. And also the advantage of getting that huge field of view is I don't have to hold the camera up to my eye the entire time. Like I can hold it really low to the ground and aim and tilt it up a little bit. So that's how I would, especially with the VX1000 that didn't have the fold out LCD screen, you had to really train yourself and be able to keep the skateboarder completely centered. Don't cut off the head, don't cut off the board. So it took a lot of practice.
And that's without a screen to even see what you're filming. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, like the way I think about it, you have to, with a fisheye lens, it seems like you have to get super close. So with skateboarding, it's like if you're like at the edge of a pool or a half pipe and the skater's coming up and you take the picture, like ideally right when the skateboard is practically touching the camera. And the good thing about the fisheye lens is then you have the skater like right in the center of the frame, but it's wide enough that you still see all the stuff around it too.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, if it's even with just a regular wide angle lens, which a fisheye is even more, like if you don't get close enough, yeah, like you said, the subject of what you're trying to take a picture or video of, it's just like this tiny dot, and it's like not very good. But
yeah, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of experience, to get good at. And I mean, Friedman, one of the best.
Yeah, and he was doing all that shooting film and
shooting film, exactly.
Manual focus, everything.
Totally, yeah.
So,
but the bad thing about the fisheye too, though, is that like, I mean, back then, like in the early to mid '90s, was like literally 99% of skateboard video would be all fisheye. Like that's all you would see, and it was just like there was a point where the fisheye pretty much never came off my camera. It just was a part of the camera. And I think it wasn't until maybe 99, 2000, somewhere around there, where people started to kind of take it off and try and be a little bit more creative with their video and their filming. And then that kind of stepped up the game again in skateboard videography, where people started using like 16 millimeter cameras. They were shooting film, like high 8 film, and they'd mix it up with the standard definition, Sony. Was it mini DV tapes? I'm trying to remember what it was even called. I guess standard definition. It's just standard def. Yeah.
Okay. So have you worked with any skateboarders that people might recognize names of? Like, who was it, just you and your buddies, or was it like, did you work on videos with any of the big name people?
Yeah. So, I mean, like later, I don't know, probably like the early 2000s is when, it was just 100% filming for me. And during that time, like the early 2000s, Northern California was like the skateboard mecca. It's always been like huge in skateboarding, especially San Francisco. But like during that time when I was in Sacramento, skateboarding, like, I mean, all of the companies, I'm gonna say probably like 90% of all skateboard companies are based in California, and of those, probably 80% of them are in Southern California.
Okay.
But during that time when I was living in Sacramento, skateboarding got so big in that area that all of the companies would come through Sacramento at least a couple of times a year to skate. And so during that time, I was filming a lot of those guys that would come through. But I mean, whether it's names that people are going to recognize, like most people recognize names off of the X Games, right? Or, even like, I mean, maybe now after a while it'll be the Olympics too, but right now it's just the X Games, and X Games is a completely different type of skateboarding than what I was doing. Like X Games pro skaters make money doing contests, and they're on ESPN and they have a lot more exposure. Whereas like the skateboarders that are actually carrying these companies are not the ones that are doing these big, X Games contests. They're out in the streets skateboarding, taking photos for magazines, and doing video and stuff like that, going on tours and so yeah. I don't know, maybe Paul Rodriguez would probably be like the most famous skateboarder I've ever filmed. But I did a commercial for Nike with Brian Anderson, who was the first openly gay skateboarder.
Oh,
He
wow.
came out like, I don't know when he came out. I don't know, a handful of years ago, but amazing skateboarder. So one of my favorite street skaters.
That's cool.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with him, you should look him up. He's a beast. He's just like this big burly dude on a board. He's got these amazing arms. He's got the most amazing style.
And he does street skating mainly?
He's a street skater, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And yeah, I don't know. What else? Brandon Biebel. I don't know if you've ever heard of Brandon Biebel. Matt Miller is a really good skateboarder. There's a lot of street skaters, but
That's cool. So you were mostly doing video, it sounds like, when you were in the Bay Area. When did you make the transition to focusing more on photography than videography?
So that happened here in Minnesota, and it was pretty much a result of not, like, for me, I equate video with skateboarding. And when I moved here, I got involved with the skateboard community, like right off the bat. Like I did this thing where, like, when I moved from San Francisco and I moved to New Orleans, when I moved to New Orleans, I went to the local skate shop and I was like, hey, I'm new in town. I'm a videographer. Like, let's hook up and do some stuff, like,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And it worked out great. Like, I became really good friends with the shop owner in New Orleans down there. And I was filming his guys and we were putting out content, it was awesome. And so I did the same thing when I came up here. I went to one of the big skate shops and was like, let's do some stuff. And then, long story short, a lot of kind of drama happened. I can get into it if you want me to. Actually, I think it might be important, actually.
Okay.
So from a kind of a business standpoint, almost. So we had made an agreement with the shop owner that we were going to make a full-length shop video. And this is a prestigious shop in the Twin Cities. I'm pretty sure never had a shop video.
Okay.
And so, and he even said we had never done one because there would always be some issue that would come up to where it just wouldn't happen. So anyways, we filmed. So, we started filming for a shop video. I think there was like 5 or 6 guys, and we were filming every day. And I told these guys from the beginning, I said, hey, all of this footage is going to the video. So nobody can see any of this footage before the video drops. If you want to do Instagram stuff, or whatever, then you're totally welcome to pull your phone out while we're filming and do it. I don't care.
Right.
But my footage is going into this. So it's not going to see the light of day. After the video's done, you all can have your footage.
Right.
And I had this conversation because I've had to have this conversation many times in the past with skateboarders.
Okay.
Because this is what always happens, is that 3 months down the line, skateboarders are coming up to me going, hey, my company, my sponsor, because most of these guys are sponsored by companies. My sponsor wants some footage. Can I give them a couple of clips?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you can't give them a couple of clips because, we've already established this from the beginning that this is how it's going to go.
Right.
And then, and so it got ugly. Like, they started spreading rumors and it just got lame. And so, and that basically, and that scenario wasn't the first time that this has happened to me. It's probably the second or third time it's happened to me.
Oh, wow.
But this time it was like such a big deal because, I don't know, maybe it was my age or something. I'm a lot older now, so I don't know.
Not going to put up with bullshit anymore.
Right. I think that might be it. And so I kind of like was done with video after that happened. Right. And
so you just kind of stopped doing video actively.
I stopped doing, well, no, I was trying to get video gigs because that would be my side gig too. Besides filming skateboarding would be, whatever little events here and there,
Yeah.
And so I would do little events or film little interviews for people or whatever. But it was trying to do video as a business that's not skateboarding was like really hard for me because like I didn't know anybody here, and like it was just people didn't want to pay the rate out here, number one, and number two, like people would always ask if I did photography. They're like,
Okay.
you know, when you do video, do you do photography? And I'm like, and the funny thing is because when I moved, you know, here, I was using DSLRs to shoot video, right? Because what, in 2008 or something like that,
Yeah.
I think Canon put out a DSLR that shot HD video. I think it was the T2i was the first. I'm probably totally wrong. That probably was nowhere near their first camera that shot video.
I
It
have
was
no
the first one
idea,
that
so sounds good to me.
yeah, but being able to shoot in HD was like, because and I got the Canon T3i for video, you know, because I was still shooting skateboarding videos. Never shot a photo on, you know,
Okay.
like it was like my video camera.
Yeah.
And so, and people were like, "Do you shoot photos?" And I'm like, "Do I shoot? I don't know." I'm like, I've never really tried shooting photos. I mean, I messed around before. Like, I would shoot a skateboard photo with no flashes or anything here and there with the fisheye, but it was never anything like. It was whatever's. But
Yeah.
I never took it seriously. I was never like, oh, I'm gonna start taking skate photos or even just photos in general. But then the compounding of that and like video technology, like just having to keep up with it was just insane, you know, with the red cameras and like who's going to pay $40,000 for a video camera, you know what I mean? When the
Wow.
next year, like, you know, now I mean you can shoot freaking 8K on your phone, I think, you know. So I was like, yeah, screw it, I'm just gonna start shooting photos, you know. And that was when, and literally I'm trying to think, like, let's see, yeah, so when I quit skateboarding, when I quit videoing videography, I sold my T3i and I upgraded to the Canon 6D,
Uh-huh.
the first 6D, the first full frame, and I was shooting video with that, and that's when I was like, I'm gonna start shooting photos with the 6D,
Mm-hmm.
and that was at the fourth precinct. I think it was literally like I got the 6D, shot a couple. I remember I shot something at Frogtown Farms here for some event for like I can't remember if it was the Animal Humane Society or something. I shot one video there,
Mm-hmm.
and then the fourth precinct happened, Jamar Clark, and I went down there with my wife, right? Because she was like connecting with people down there, and we were bringing food and stuff down there, and like blankets and shit.
So just for anyone
And
who may not know, the Jamar Clark was killed by the Minneapolis police. Was it 2014 or 15?
24, I think it was 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, and in response, there was an occupation of the fourth precinct of Minneapolis police, which is on the north side, a few blocks from where he was killed. And so people just started gathering there and occupied the space outside the precinct for like 3 weeks or so, if I
Wow.
remember
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah, two, three
Wow.
weeks. So that was when you first started taking pictures. Okay. Because yeah, my memory is that's around when I started seeing your photos. And I remember seeing like your photos and Chris June's photos from the
Yeah.
protests in that period of time. And it was just like, wow, these are amazing photos. Like my photos don't look like that when I snap a few shots at a protest or whatever. Like I got to step up my game, you know? So, okay, that's interesting. That's when you started taking pictures. Yeah. What drew you to taking pictures at protests?
So that so I would say that was like my intro to it, right? That was like me being almost a complete outsider. I mean, if it wasn't for my wife, right? Like I wouldn't have gone there, right? But because of her, I went there, and I shot photos there, and then I can't even remember if I post. No, I did post those photos. I did post those photos, and those photos got really, like, they were really well received. Like I wasn't expecting to really, you know, like I posted them, you know, and they got received really well. And then I'm trying to remember, like my next thing was the governor's mansion, right after Philando Castile,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what you see. You're better. You've got all the historical context, like years and the years and everything. I don't. What was that, 2016?
I think so. Yeah. That
Okay,
sounds right.
so that was the governor's, yeah, and so that was the first time where it impacted me, where I felt it personally. I
Mm.
felt it, you know, like it was, you know, Philando worked at a school pretty much in my neighborhood,
Yep.
right? And he was murdered like down the street, pretty much like over by the fairgrounds, which is right down the street from me.
Yeah. And that was live, it was live streamed, right? His wife was, or his partner was live
Yeah,
streaming
yeah,
as
yeah,
he was
and it was
murdered by the police in their car when
right,
he was
right.
complying with every order, did everything you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was when I was like, I want to do something, right? I don't know what I can. I do know that I can take pictures, and that's what I know, or that's all I can do. So I wasn't trying to find a bullhorn. You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to make signs and chant and do like I didn't want to just show up and stand there and look like an idiot. But I think at that time too, it was like I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this for real. I'm gonna get into this protest photography, or movement photography, but I'm gonna do it like I didn't want to sensationalize it, like I wanted to do what mainstream media wasn't doing. That's basically because every time I saw a photo, you look on CNN or even Yahoo News or whatever, and it was just always like I don't know, somebody pissed off, like an angry face or yelling, and there's definitely times for that too, but like how we do it, like we don't just post like one or two photos. It'll be like a series of photos, so you have a context of what's going on. It's not just one photo and then that's it.
You're telling more of the story. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, and yeah, and like I think Chris was like I would see Chris out there. Like Chris was like pretty much the only other dude that was shooting photos, and then there'd be like King was out there, but he'd be live streaming at the time. I'm trying to remember
I
who that
think
guy was.
Nico was out there at that time with
Yeah,
Unicorn
Nico would be
Riot.
out there too. Yep. Nico was out there a lot. Yeah, but it kind of was just all really organic,
Hmm.
like I never felt during that time during the protests at the governor's mansion, because I guess it was it was an occupied space too,
Yeah.
and it was like I had been doing it forever, and
Hmm.
it was like I knew everybody, like everybody's just like, oh hey, what's like people wouldn't even know my name, but they were saw me but it was just like it was just so comfortable,
And
that
people
like
would like come up to you like, "Oh, I saw your photos," or things like that.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I would just be like, and when okay, well, I guess I'll do it again.
Mhm.
I didn't think it would be I didn't think they would have it as big of an impact as they did or do. And so after a while, it's just like it almost becomes like an obligation,
Hmm.
Yeah.
So had you been involved or gone to protests before that, like in your life? Was that something you did once in a while or regularly,
No,
like
so I
in
went to
California or?
so in California in 2011 was when the big Occupy Oakland happened, Occupy Wall Street,
Right.
and that was in Oakland was just like crazy during that time. I think it was like maybe a couple of weeks and maybe even longer.
I remember seeing actions like where they shut down the port and stuff in Oakland, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And but I would go out to Oakland at night with my T3i shooting video, and but yeah, it would be gnarly. Like people would shut down they'd pull the dumpsters out in the middle of the street, set them on fire, riot cops, and got pepper sprayed.
You did?
Yeah. So that was, not like I think you were hit like directly, like I'm gonna get that dude,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like that's how you got hit. Yeah, I was more like in a group of people and just like
yeah.
got the community spray type thing,
Yep, yep.
But that was more I went out for like B-roll of for my skateboard videos, because back then
Okay.
I was like in the back then 2011 I wasn't I was like very non-political at all. Yeah, I was very non-political, and so it for me.
Other than in the sense that, skateboarding, it's sort of a subculture with some sort of rebellious kind of characteristics, but not like you weren't involved in organizing or like going to protest regularly, things like that.
Right, exactly. And I just didn't follow politics. It was just like at that point, it was like I was just completely engulfed in skateboarding. There was nothing outside of my head that involved anything other than skateboarding. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was dating my wife during Occupy Oakland.
Oh,
And
okay.
so yeah, but even at that point, like I really wasn't, like we were still dating. But after like living in, when we moved to New Orleans, and just her, educating me and taking me along to different events and things like that, meeting her friends, and
Hmm.
slowly I started to realize, yeah, there's some definite bullshit going on out in the world,
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
So,
So
so you
I
s- you started doing photography at protests around that time when Jamar Clark was killed, Philando Castile was killed, and then you were out in the streets a lot, documenting, taking photos, like in the George Floyd uprising, like, and the year or a couple of years after since then, Yeah, you were out a lot then, and in that stuff we did also get tear gassed and had to deal with a lot of that kind of stuff where cops were like targeting protesters and in some cases even targeting photographers or videographers. And we all started wearing like the protective equipment and all that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that? Like, I'd love to hear some stories from some of the things you saw. I don't. Were you out during the uprising itself, like the several days around when the third precinct was burned, or did you go out more after that?
I would go out. I was out quite a bit, but I would definitely dip out before things got too crazy. Yeah, at that time, I'm trying to remember if yeah, Bolden was already born, so I had a really young. Bolden's 2.5 now, but he was born in 2019. And then the 4-year-old on top of that. There's no way I was going to leave my wife at home with 2 kids.
Yeah,
I was just like,
there were just some limits.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And so I remember like the freeway shut down. Like I remember like coming onto the exit, like walking out onto the exit and being like on the tail end, like towards the. You were there, right? Were you there that night? Did you get
which night was
corralled
that? Which
when there
time?
was like 800 people
Oh,
were arrested?
the mass arrest, the
Yeah,
646.
the
Yeah,
mass.
yep,
Yeah, the
I was
646.
there. Yeah,
Yeah. And so that night, I remember being closer to the exit and like like hearing the cops, like talk their, like this is what we're gonna do, and I'm like calling King and Phil, like, dude, they're gonna shut down, they're gonna start arresting people, like they're taking everybody, like you guys need to get out right now. And if you remember, like everybody was like corralled, like there was like a wall, and
yep,
there was like a 12-foot wall, and that was it. Like there was
yeah,
nowhere to go. And I was like right at the section where if I had to, I could hop a fence or
right.
I could get out. And so when they started, shutting everything down, I was like, I'm gone. Like I can't do this.
Yeah. So you were
And
able to
yeah,
get out.
so
Okay.
yeah. So I got out, because like I just yeah. But yeah, I mean, what other like you're the pepper you getting pepper sprayed was gnarly. That was crazy. That was random because we weren't even supposed to, like, there was nothing even supposed to be going on down
Yeah.
there. Remember, we were at a protest like earlier for see, this sucks that there's so many protests for
Yeah, I do remember there was a protest earlier in the day, like in the afternoon.
the Stone
Um,
Arch.
yep. And then I think the Stone Arch one made, oh no, that was the Stone Arch one too. I think you're right.
Yeah.
And then after we left, I remember seeing something online or whatever, rumors started
Yeah.
flying that the police had killed a black man in downtown
Right.
Minneapolis in a parking ramp at 7th and Nicollet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I
And I know
remember
you called me or you
we,
texted me or something, right?
yeah, and we were talking, we were like, damn, should we go? Should we go? Because
Yeah.
at least for me, I didn't have any of my protective equipment with me by then. We were all had stuff like a vest, bulletproof vest. We had tactical
Yeah, I was
helmet,
strapped. I was
goggles.
already, yeah, yeah. I was already strapped to the gills that day.
You already had all your equipment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't. I just had like a t-shirt on and whatever, but
Right.
not prepared at all. But yeah, and then
Yeah.
we got down there and it turned out it wasn't true, the rumors that the police had killed a black man. But by then the police had reacted so violently to the people who had been gathering there that
Yeah.
it was just crazy. It was chaos. Yeah.
Totally. They totally escalated it.
And this was like in June, so I believe so. George Floyd had been killed in
Right.
late May, so this is just a
Like
few weeks after.
it was just a few weeks after. Yeah. That's right.
And there were still protests like almost every day of thousands of people,
Mhm.
and then this
Yeah.
happened and everyone was just like, no fucking way. Yeah, that was a crazy day. Do you want to just describe for people like what you were wearing, like the gear that I was just talking about, for protection and why?
Yeah. So I guess so the main piece of kit now for a photojournalist is a Kevlar vest, which who would have ever thought, like when you're covering peaceful protests that you would need to wear a Kevlar vest. But I think a lot of us, no, I think we pretty much all got them for the same. And the funny thing is what, why are we wearing these Kevlar vests? To protect ourselves from people that are supposed to be protecting us. That's the funny thing is, that's the funny thing about it is like,
Yeah,
I'm wearing a Kevlar vest so that I don't get hit by rubber projectiles from the police,
yeah,
even though constitutionally I'm supposed to be protected,
yeah,
and there's no, and so it's ridiculous. Like people be like, why are you wearing that? Like I remember we were at, the first time I got it, it was the state fair, the Minnesota State Aid Fair
yeah,
protest. And yeah, people would be like, why are you, it's funny though, because I'd tell them and they go, yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking about getting one,
mm,
and there'd be people like, whatever. But yeah. And so even if the vibes seem cool and mellow, like I would still wear it, you know. But
Well,
anyway, so you got the vest.
mhm.
No, sorry, go ahead. What?
I was just going to say, I just remembered as you were talking, even going back to the 4th Precinct occupation when Jamar Clark was killed, there was that one night that some random white supremacists showed up with guns and actually shot a few of the protesters there. And so
Yep, yep.
you're protecting yourself, one, from potential projectiles and whatever from the police, but also just from random right wing or racist crazy
Sure.
people, who
That's true
showed up
too,
at the
yeah.
4th Precinct. And then I don't remember the exact sequence of time, but there was also in Wisconsin where that random 17-year-old or whatever showed up and with a rifle or whatever. I don't remember what weapon he had, but like killed people at the protest. And
Yeah.
there was people from here, like Chris June, I think, was there and actually saw that happening. And so
Oh yeah, that's right.
all this
Yeah.
stuff is happening around us. So yeah, it seems like a pretty logical reaction. Like, wow, we're going to be out here day after day. There's
Yeah.
risks, Yeah. So Kevlar vest, and then what else were you wearing?
I think I had my bump helmet with me, and that's really, for I mean, flying projectiles just in general, or getting pushed down, or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was just always like being. I think if I didn't have kids, it wouldn't be as big of an issue for me, like my personal safety,
Yeah,
But having a family, it's just like it makes going out a lot bigger of a deal. Like you think about, like I always think about worst case scenarios when I
absolutely,
go out, and like how to cover those worst case scenarios.
for
Yeah.
sure. So when you're taking pictures at protests, have you had people get mad at you or tell you they don't want their photo taken or that you shouldn't be taking photos at protests? Those kinds of things go around, from time to time. And I just saw like another round of them go around with the protests against the Supreme Court ruling around Roe versus Wade, that people give advice like, don't take your camera to protests, don't take pictures, don't take video, all this kind of stuff. Have you ever had anyone sort of get mad at you for documenting protests?
No, I actually have the very opposite effect. I have people thanking me for being there a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that way more. And the one time where anybody ever questioned me, they questioned who I was, and it was a newer, and that's the thing, like in the movement, the Twin Cities movement here has changed quite a bit since George Floyd, since pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd, the movement, the faces have changed. There's a lot of new people.
So that's what you mean, just new people in when you say it's changed.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
right. Well, yeah, for this conversation. And so yeah, that night, literally while we were taking care of you when you were pepper sprayed,
Mm-hmm.
someone came up to me and was like questioning who I was and who I was with while I was standing there. Like I think there was somebody might have been flushing milk. I feel like we ran into a medic at some point and somebody was flushing milk on you.
Yeah, Corey,
Oh,
who's one of the main street medics. Yeah.
okay, yeah. And so yeah, and that I think that's the only time that like stood out, and where I was like, where like I had to like explain myself,
Mm-hmm.
who I was. And I think maybe it was because I was in Kevlar, because I have had people be like when I was up north covering Line 3 protests,
Mm-hmm.
and people would be like, or a person came up to me, and was like, why are you dressed like that?
Mm-hmm.
Why? And I would have to explain to them, well, I'm a target. You got to understand, like, as a photojournalist, I'm a target to law enforcement, and so I'm just protecting myself. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, can you understand that could be intimidating to some people? And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, my safety intimidates you, but whatever. What can you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. So changing gears a little bit, I'm interested to talk a little more about lighting and photography, specifically like at protests. Like we've talked about lighting outside of the context of protest photography in the past, but one thing I noticed, maybe it was just at one protest, I don't know, but maybe it was at more. I've seen you using flash while taking pictures at protests, and not even just not at night, but like during the day. And most other photographers at protests don't use a flash or lighting unless it's after dark, and even then, a lot of times people just use the ambient light. Wait till you get under a street light or car lights, whatever. So yeah, what are your thoughts on lighting? Like, why do you use a flash sometimes at a protest even when there's daylight?
So I use a flash in the daytime when the sun is like when the sun is in an unflattering position.
Mm-hmm.
So if the sun's right above you or if it's right behind you, you know, I'm going to get like some nasty shadows on your face.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, like that's just like my pet peeve, or to me, that's what like, I want my pictures, like I want to be able to see your face. I don't want your eyes to be dark, you know, like I want to see like a catch light in your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the sky to not be blown out. Like I don't want the sky to look white if it's not overcast. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
blue sky, I want the sky to be blue. And so really like I'm just trying to keep it as, I guess, real as I mean, it's not really real because I'm just,
Well,
I don't
yeah.
know, to me it's just what looks good.
It's like it allows you to expose for the sky, so the sky's not blown out, and then the flash kind of fills the light in on someone's face if the sun
Yeah.
isn't hitting it directly. And
Yeah.
you can do a little bit in Lightroom or in post production afterwards to try to
Sure.
fiddle around with that stuff, but you get
But I
a
like to
much.
do, yeah, I like to do as much as I can in camera. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I like to edit as the least amount as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you hear some people say, and like I said it too, you know, when I was learning, just starting, like, oh, I just do natural light. Like I don't like using a flash, and people who like never use a speed light or a strobe, you know, but you know, as I've learned more, I think, and worked more with flash and gotten more comfortable with it, I feel like I'm more confident in being able to use it. And then I see people not using it. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you? You know, you can make a much better image. You can make, like you said, where you can actually see people's faces and see everything, the sky, the way it actually looks. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that, it was interesting to me when I saw you were doing that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's just another one of those things where, you know, you can just take some snapshots on your phone at a protest and upload them, whatever, to social media, or you can actually try to make images that are really stunning and beautiful. And
Yeah.
you know, using a flash can be one of those ways you can do that.
Yeah, I used to think that that's what people, why they would say that, like I only shoot natural light.
Mm-hmm.
But like two of my favorite photographers off the top of my head don't use flash at all.
Okay.
And they're, you know, Caroline Yang and Adonis Rose Green, both are natural light shooters, and they're just like I don't want to say jealous, but I'm just like, oh, like every time they just like they hit me in the face with like their photos, you know.
Mm.
And maybe that's another thing too, is it takes out the having to search for the right light situations, you know. Sometimes like
True.
when it's an overcast day, it's like perfect, you know, there's no shadows anywhere, it's beautiful, you've got your wonderful natural softbox, like life is good. And that's what, you know, people who don't usually take photos, they think that blue sky is the best, right? They think, oh, bright blue sunny day, like this is the best day for photography. That's the worst day for photography, you know.
It's terrible.
Like,
Yeah, the light's
yeah,
just so harsh, and yeah.
yeah, so I hate shooting protests in the middle of the day, but when you have to do it, then, you know, I got my flash and it's all good. Yeah, I've always, you know, it's funny is I've always wanted to like step it up and actually have like an assistant holding an off-camera flash with a softbox on it at protests, you know, and just like kind of walk around in the crowd and like, but I'd probably get kicked out.
I know, yeah, you could do such amazing work because, yeah, I mean,
Right?
on camera flash is always, you know, not ideal, but
Yeah.
off camera, yeah, you can get the right angles and distance, and
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I definitely hear what you're saying, like whether it's making a decision like not using flash and just using natural light, or whether it's the decision to just use whatever, pick a lens, like rather than a zoom lens, just using like a 35 millimeter and not being able to zoom. You know, sometimes putting those restrictions on yourself forces you to be more creative and get shots that you might not get otherwise. So I definitely respect that as a decision of somebody who is a really good photographer and just makes a decision. I'm just going to do natural light, can sort of understand the light and figure out how to get amazing shots anyway. Like that is sort of next level, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess changing topics a little bit. So yeah, I remember, and I don't remember what year this was, maybe 2018, 2017, 2019, something like that. It must have been 2017 or 18. I remember running into you one day randomly at the dog park in St. Paul. And that was right at that moment where I was starting to want to get more seriously into photography. And I remember just like grilling you with questions. And I don't remember everything you said in response to that grilling, but I do remember asking you, like, where are some good spots, you know, to get photos? Like, because I know I had seen your abandoned building photography and some of your, like, you know, streetscape or urban kind of skyline kind of stuff. And I remember you like pointed basically right across the street where there was some train tracks and an old train, and I saying I could get some interesting shots there. So I went over right after and did that and tried it and just sort of kept going from there. And that's around when I really caught the photography bug again, after not doing much since like high school or college. And, taking off from that, like what advice do you have for people who want to get more into photography or just want to take better photos, even with their phones, whether for taking photos at a protest or something else?
I guess my advice would be to find something that you enjoy photographing, really. Yeah, like
Because that's how you got into it, right? It sounds like you were into skating and you wanted to document that. And so you felt motivated to.
exactly. And I wanted to be really good at it. I think that carried over into when I started taking photos, wanting to be really good at it and wanting to master the craft, and wanting to produce good work. It wasn't just like I enjoy taking photos,
Mm-hmm.
like and actually for me, I mean, this is kind of a side note, but like the photo itself, the end product is just kind of like a byproduct of everything else that I enjoy about photography. It's like such a small part of it. I don't know, like I enjoy the gear, the just the whole act of it is more what I enjoy more than the actual product.
Like
The product is cool too, but
the planning and all, everything
yeah.
and the learning. Yeah.
But yeah, but I think that's what it is. Whether it be, like I love cars, and it's something that I've always wanted to do was like take good photos of really nice cars, or if you like animals, dogs, go to the dog park and take pictures. But you got to find something that you love, because then when you're looking at the photos, it's gonna be that much more impactful to you.
Mm.
So yeah, if you food, whatever it is, but I think that's kind of what can spark the bug.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And a lot of times when I started going on Facebook or YouTube just to learn more about how do I become a better photographer, one of the things that people say is like people always at the beginning feel like they have to go to some like really beautiful, stunning place, go to the national parks or things like that to get good photos. And it's just really so not true. Really, you should, or you have to take photos with like models, but really you should always, I think, start with what, like you said, what is interesting or what motivates you, and document that and start from there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned taking photos of cars, and I know you also posted over the years a lot of photos of a lot of things besides protests. Like I know you've done some abandoned building and abandoned space kind of photography, some night photography, like long exposure stuff, nature photography, like at some of the state parks, and your portraits with whether it's with your kids or other people really are just phenomenal, I think. So I'd love to just hear about some of your work in those types of photography. Like how did you learn how to do that, or how did you get into like finding abandoned places, or yeah.
So yeah, abandoned. So all of those came kind of like, I don't know, but Phil Ward was the dude that got me into abandoned photography. I can't remember the first place we went, but I do remember going there and going, "What the hell am I supposed to take? What can I take a picture of?" Like the first time we went, I couldn't appreciate the aesthetics for some reason. Like I don't know why. I mean, I always thought it was cool, but for
Yeah.
photography wise, I didn't know how to do it. Like I could see it in video how it could be cool, but I was like, it was challenging. It was a challenge. But then after that first time, I was like hooked. I
Okay.
was like, this is awesome. The whole experience was cool. Like climbing, like having to climb into a place that's like nasty and decrepit, and hopefully dark, because the darker the better, because then you got to use your flashlights, you got to get super creative. And
Hmm. Again,
um
it sounds like the photo is just one piece of it. The whole adventure and process is really
exactly.
amazing too.
Yeah, totally. And so and Phil, like, he's lived here his entire life, and he's worked in the Twin Cities, forever, and he's lived out. He's been here, and so he knows where everything is. And it's like, we would do that, and then I was shooting long exposure stuff before I met Phil, but he's definitely the one who showed me every spot here in town. Like we'd go out, we would go out like weekly, and I would never even have to worry. I would just jump in the car and be like, wherever we go, it's gonna be cool,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I wouldn't even pay attention to directions or anything. I'd just be like, yeah,
Just
this
end
is
up at
awesome.
some like random abandoned decrepit place.
Totally. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I remember talking to Phil too about getting into Six Flags in New Orleans. Did you go there with him too?
Yeah. No, I didn't go there with him. When I lived in New Orleans, I went there a few times,
It's like
and it was
it's
awesome.
a whole abandoned Six Flags. That's just
Yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah. And but it not only abandoned, but like a lot of it's in swamp. So there's like wild boar out there. There's gators. It's crazy out there.
Is that because of Hurricane
So,
Katrina?
exactly. It's because yeah, and they just left it, the
Wow.
same. But I would go out there and like we actually would like skate in there, and it was just like oh my gosh, was I yeah, it was I don't know where those video clips went. But anyways, yeah, we filmed a bunch of stuff there. I had a buddy from San Francisco fly out. We got some amazing clips there. And this was before I was shooting photos, which sucks because
Oh
while I
man.
was living there, yeah, I was literally less than 5 minutes from that park. Like I lived right, like you go out the entrance, go down the street, turn left, and my house is there.
Wow.
And then I met Phil, and then I introduced Phil to a buddy of mine, Russ, in New Orleans, and I was like, you guys would love each other. And
Hmm.
so they started talking to each other, and then I can't remember, Phil went down there, and they met and hit it off, and Russ took Phil to Six Flags, and you've seen Phil's ridiculously amazing photos from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that place is awesome. And then I did get to go back a couple of years ago with Russ, and we went in there, and I got some photos too. So, and that night I could have been there all night. You could be there for a week and get amazing photos every night.
Yeah.
And,
Sounds like a must go place at some point.
and I mean, in New Orleans is just an abandoned urban explorer's like dream because there's just so many buildings there are abandoned, and they don't tear them down like they do here.
Wow.
Like they're just there, like, yeah.
So what about portraits? Your portraits, especially of like your kids, are just, in my opinion, amazing. And how did you learn how to do portraits? Practice, practice,
All
practice.
practice all on my own. I definitely knew, for some reason, I knew that I had to know how to use flash for shooting portraits.
Hmm.
Like for some reason in my head, I wasn't. It was just like I personally can't be successful at shooting portraits if I'm not using artificial light. That was just in my head, and I don't know if it's because I'm a gear person, and I was like, oh, this is another chance for me to get into even more gear.
Yeah.
And so that's probably another, but even still, like I've been using flashes for, I don't know, years now, at least 5 or 6 years, and I still don't know half of what I feel like I could know.
Totally.
And yeah, like I don't use a light meter. Do you use a light meter when you,
I
yeah,
don't.
like, yeah.
I
And
mean, it would have been necessary in the film days, but now you can just sort of take a shot, look at it, adjust, take a shot, look at
right,
it, adjust, and so
yeah,
you
but
can
I
just sort
know,
of cheat, but
but I know photographers that still use them, but
you can be a lot
yeah.
more
And
precise
so
that way for sure. It
yeah,
can,
yeah,
yeah,
technically precise, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, my portraits were horrible at first, man. Like my event photography was horrible at first, and I don't know. I
Really?
think it was, yeah, the stress of, because I wasn't like I don't think I ever did it like a gig for free. Like even from the beginning, I was like, a friend was never like, hey, can you come and film or take pictures of my birthday party? It was like somebody asked me, and they like asked me my rate. I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't even know like I didn't know anything. But like even my first event, and even my first portrait, the first time I shot someone's portrait, I can't remember who it was, but I know it was a paid gig. And
Okay.
so I was like, if someone's going to pay me for anything, whatever the amount is, I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to like
Yeah.
do as best as I can, because that's
Yeah, it's
whatever.
just what
That's
you
just
have to do.
what
Yeah.
yeah. So I probably YouTubed, and at the time I think I had fixed lights for video, right? And
Sure.
so
Continuous light. Yeah.
yeah, continuous light. And so I YouTubed how to take portraits with continuous light, and I watched like a handful of those videos. I tried it out, and I'll tell you right now, the continuous lights that I have are the worst portrait lights ever.
Oh,
But
really?
like yeah, they're so bad. But until I turned them into black and white, and then they looked amazing. I've done a lot of horrible paid gigs. Let's put it that way.
Like
In the
the
beginning.
product you delivered was horrible, or the experience was
Yeah,
horrible? Okay. Like
yeah.
you
Like
look
the
back at
first
it
couple
now
of
and you're like, oh my God, I could have done that so much better.
Totally, totally. And that was like for the first handful of events. But I'm like pretty confident in my photography now, where like when I do events or, do portraits. Even portraits I still get pretty nervous about. If I'm shooting family portraits, I get really worked up, and my anxiety levels get really high like the night before.
Okay.
But I'm like 99% of the time I'm pretty happy with the results. But yeah, just all self-taught, I guess, would be to answer.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that's something that I've definitely experienced, like in talking with you about whether it's photography or other hobbies. Like when you get into something, you like get into it deep and explore everything about it and know everything about it. And yeah, I'm not quite that way. I feel like I'm just sort of scratching the surface and figuring it out as I go and stumbling along. But yeah, so you kind of got into talking about doing photography for money, and we haven't talked about that yet. I just want to touch on that a little bit. And again, when I was first thinking about making that leap to doing photography for money and not just as a hobby, I remember we talked for a while, and that really helped me think about like if and how I could do photography and ask people for money for it. And in my experience, there can be contradictions in that, especially if you're working with people you know. It's always uncomfortable talking about money, and you're working with like people or organizations in the community or in the movement that maybe don't have a lot of money. So you don't want to charge people too much, but you have a skill and you have to pay the bills and cover your costs. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of people don't value photography in the same way they would have maybe 20 years ago when everyone didn't have like a phone in their pocket, that they're carrying around. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on all of that. Like, are you able to make a living from photography, or have you at different points? And
Yeah, I mean, am I able to? Yeah, here in this present time in the Twin Cities, I am. Like, I always think about whether or not I'd be able to make a living in photography in the Bay Area, and I'm like, no, I would definitely have to have a couple of side jobs, and
just because the cost of living's just skyrocketed out there, just to bananas levels, right?
yeah, and the population, and just, how many, I'm sure there's like a million photographers out there.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm like really fortunate, I think, to be here in the Twin Cities where it's not flooded. There's not a flood of just talent, and I don't know. But you and I, we also like, it's different because we're part of such a tight knit community, the movement community and the nonprofit community,
Mm-hmm.
because word gets around and we don't have to market ourselves as much because of word of mouth. And
That's really been my experience too. Like when I made the decision to try and do photography for money and leave my day job, I wasn't sure how long it would take before I'd be able to get the kind of income I need to pay the bills and everything. And I'm also similar to you, not really good at marketing myself or, branding myself, all that kind of stuff that you listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos, and it's all about all that stuff. And I tried a little bit to do some Facebook ads for wedding photography and just failed miserably. So I've really just gone on word of mouth, and it has worked pretty well actually. And
yeah,
I shoot at one wedding, and then very often I'll get a email or call from someone who was at that wedding who's like, "Oh yeah, I saw your photos from
yeah,
there. Can you do my wedding?" And it just sort of goes from
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very I don't know, like I consider myself like a very lazy like business person, you
Uh-huh.
know? And yeah, so like I'm like like I had a website, because everybody says you got to do a website, right?
Right.
And do you still have a website? You do have a website.
I do, yeah. And
Yeah.
I have like forums on there that people can contact me if they want to get my rates or whatever. I get like an email every couple weeks. It's, you start off, you think like, okay, I'm going to put up a website, and then the inquiries are going to come pouring in, and it's just not the
But
case.
people yeah, but people still go through your website?
I have gotten some. Yeah. I just actually got a inquiry about doing headshots for an office of 40 people, from someone I don't know. And,
Oh
uh,
wow.
from my website. I've gotten a few wedding inquiries on my website, but very few. It's
That's way more than I've gotten
okay.
that I ever got on mine. And who knows? I mean, this was like maybe I should do a new one. I don't know. It's been years, but I stopped because like it was getting like literally a hit a month,
Mm,
you know. But I also wasn't like, hey, everybody go check out my website. It was more like I used it as a reference.
mm-hmm.
And then I was like, why am I paying to use it as a reference when I can just put my photos on Facebook and have them go through my albums? And so that's pretty much what I do now. But I've been here, and most of my yearly business, like I do the same events every year. I do the same big events every year.
Like events for
And
nonprofits and things like that.
right, for the most part, like 95% of my work is probably nonprofit work. And every once in a while I'll get some major company that's advertising agency or something that needs some work done. And those are awesome because then you don't feel guilty about your rates, or you know, you don't have to worry about sliding scale or anything like that. You know, even
Yeah.
if you do have to worry about waiting 6 months to get paid, that's like the only issue, is it always takes forever from the big corps.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about gear here and there, and I guess I'd like to hear, I don't think we've gone through exactly like what gear you use now for photography. So like, yeah, what kind of camera do you use when you shoot these days? And do you use the same camera for all the different kinds of photography you do? And what lens or lenses?
So
Yeah.
I finally upgraded to mirrorless less than a year ago. So I was using the Canon 5D Mark III and the Canon 6D Mark One for like forever, until literally like not like less than a year ago, and then I finally upgraded. I've been waiting for Canon to come out with a legitimate full frame mirrorless camera, and
Yeah, they got,
everybody's around me's already switched. Everybody, I think, I think King might have actually had already switched over. Christian has not switched over yet. Maybe he has now, but I don't think he has.
okay.
But
He was
like,
still
you know,
doing
Phil had already,
DSLR.
yeah, but Phil had already switched over to Sony. My buddy Russ had already switched over to Sony,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, no, I'm like sticking with Canon. I got it, because I had all these lenses, you know, like I had all these Canon L lenses,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm not selling these. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, you know, like. I want to still be able to use them, but then obviously, of course, I knew they were going to switch the mounts anyways, but whatever. I wanted to wait for Canon to come out with good, and they finally did. They came out with the R5 and the R6, and they're just like, I can't believe it's almost like way too easy now. You know, with their autofocus system, their eye autofocus system, it's like anybody can take phenomenal photos.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I absolutely love them, and I only have two RF lenses, but they're my main ones, which is the 70 to 200 2.8 IS, and the 15 to 35 2.8 IS. The RF 15, because the 16 to 35 didn't have IS, so the new ones do. The new one has, and you know, the camera body has in-body image stabilization, and the lens
Right.
has image stabilization as well. So it's like the first time I shot video with the camera, I was like walking. I'm like, I don't need a monopod anymore. I don't need a tripod anymore. Like I can just like walk, and it was just like smooth. I
Smooth.
couldn't believe it. Yeah,
Amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
So you use the 70 to 200, and then what was the wide angle one you said?
Yeah, 15 to 35.
And so you don't use sort of one in the middle of that that's, 20 to 28 to 70 or anything like that?
No, the 24 to 70. No, it sucks. Like, because what they always say, that's part of the Trinity, right? Is the
Yep. Yep.
24 to 70. Yeah, and no, my 24 to 70 sits in my case and rarely ever gets used. Like, I'll shoot it for like group photos. I use it for group photos, but other than that, I'm all about the 15 to 35.
So what do you use
And
for portraits? Do you use shoot it at like 35, or do you use the 70 to
I use the
200
70 to 200
for portraits? Uh-huh.
for portraits, and I try to always shoot it at 200 if possible.
So you're pretty far back when you're doing that then.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I would say even like family portraits, I shoot with the 70 to 200. So it's just like an amazing portrait lens for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What about any gear beyond just the camera and lenses? What's some other gear that you like that you think people might benefit from or be interested in?
Like flashes and stuff, or just, are you referring to like just protest photography, or
No,
what are you talking
no,
about?
more in general, I guess. Yeah. Like whether it's
I mean,
flashes or like the harness or whatever to carry two cameras at the same time, or
yeah, I hate it. I hate having to carry two cameras at the same time, but it's kind of important for what we do. Yeah, I don't know, dual camera strap. New, I guess my other favorite piece of kit is my Peak Design tripod, the carbon fiber one. Are you familiar with the Peak Design one?
no, tell me about it.
So you use all the Peak Design stuff, the straps and the
The
wrist
straps,
straps
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, so you've got the little Arca plate
Yep.
on the bottom. Anyway, so Peak Design made a tripod where there's like zero negative space between the legs. So it's just like nice and solid. The legs aren't round, they're not circular legs, and they're not, I can't even really explain the shape, but basically when you collapse the whole thing, it's just, there's no negative space between the legs. And so it's super small, super compact. Like you could fit it in your water bottle pocket on your backpack if you have one.
Okay.
And it's just like one knob on the top that controls everything. Like there's not, like, you don't have like the two knobs that you got to like do all kinds of crap with, and regular tripod.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's literally just like one thing where you can adjust everything. It's like right there. It's a little expensive, but
I'm going to have to look into that.
yeah.
Yeah, because when I first started, I got the cheapest tripod I could find, and that, it's fine. But when you're doing like long exposure, things like that, if it's not fully stable, you're going to get some shake or, yeah.
Yeah. What strobes are you using? Have you
So,
checked out the 8200s?
so I have a AD 600, one of
Oh, you
those.
got the big boy.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
which is awesome. I don't
Uh-huh.
have an AD 200. That's sort of high on my list of things to get next. One or two of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, I got two of them. I absolutely love them. I don't know why I waited so long to get them.
Hmm.
Because originally I was going to get the 8600, and I was like, well, I'm gonna get two of these, first, and see how these go. And I'm like, I don't even know if I need the 8600 anymore, because these things are just like, they're tiny, they're super small, and you can put them super far back. They're plenty of light. Yeah,
Hmm.
they're great.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's a wedding photographer, that's what he uses at weddings. So he has like off-camera flash. He just sort of holds it in his hand, and then shoots with the other hand. And it's light and
Yeah,
small enough that you can do that, which is kind of
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So we've been on here for a while now. So why don't we start to wrap up? And I just wanted to see if there's anything else you want to touch on that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, but this might be off the record. I don't know. So you know how you say the Red Lens podcast?
Yeah.
You should just chop it to the Red Lens, dude.
Yeah.
The Red Lens is an awesome name. Yeah, I was like, oh, the Red Lens is so cool. Like, just say, welcome to the Red Lens.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's just
shorter and people are listening to it, so they already know it's a podcast, right? So that makes sense. I like it.
Yep, yep.
So where can people find your work online, see some of your photography or videography, or get in touch with you if they want to hire you to take some pictures?
I guess Facebook and Instagram are pretty much the only place. Instagram at Thaiphy PQ, and yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Thaiphy Phan-Quang.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this interview. I think it was a lot of fun. And
Right on. Yeah, totally.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but that beauty a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but
you can support Red Lens Podcast by supporting my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/SiegelPhotos, SIGALPHOTOS, and sign up for a small monthly donation. That will go a long way in helping sustain the podcast and my work as a political photographer. Thank you for checking out and supporting Red Lens Podcast.